Lake, right?
Yeah, and this one is recording.
Okay.
So we're live.
All right, good evening. Tansiga ke hogi fitna ho nuska painapa gi uta Montreal Lake. Montreal sage gari sidiga tu ani doan manila Montreal Lake. So you know man, Darryl, Mccallum, Boots Mccallum and Theo on the radio and I'm on a wiki view Samuel and I've been invited by the prevention program of Montreal Lake to do my own little presentation on identity, culture, language, and treaties this evening. So I am very honored to be here this evening, and I'm a special guest presenter as the Peter Valentine Cree Nation, former chief of Peter Valentine Cree Nation. So that's how I'm presenting myself here tonight. And I guess a little bit about myself before we start the presentation. I'm a fluent Cree speaker, TH dialect and Pigiswan, from originally from Pelican Narrows, Kanidwanhook, Wapawi Wustigan, Sadiga to the Narrows of Fear, Wapawi Wustigan, that's where I come from. Asin Skawit Nunida, I'm a Rocky Cree person from that area. It was Itaw Nisnan, our people, Asin Skawit Nuot. So that's how we introduce ourselves. So I introduce myself as a Rocky Cree from Peter Valentine Cree Nation. I'm a former chief. I'm an educator. I've educated kindergarten. I've gone on in my education career to teach for a couple of years, and also moved on to administration, where I was able to manage a couple of schools for approximately 8-9 years in Pelican Narrows, my home community, which we have two schools, Wapawistigan High School and Wapanachak Elementary School. So, and those are approximately about 1,000 students in Pelican Narrows. It's our largest community of Peter Valentine Cree Nation. So that's where I was born and raised, on the reservation of Pelican Narrows, and I had my opportunity to work for my people, and I continue working there today. Today as Peter Valentine Cree Nation, I work with the Education Authority, looking after the language, the culture, and treaty education, as well as a little bit of land base as well. So those are my areas that I look after, and I welcome you all to my presentation. And I'd like to first of all invite you guys, if you're at home, you could gently stand up, but in our Cree culture, we normally stand up and start everything with an opening prayer. So I would like to start tonight by reinforcing our culture that we always carry on the Creator, and I thank the one that invited me here this evening, Abby. Thank you for the tobacco, and I will say a prayer in our own Cree language, calling on the Creator to bless. Pagit na manis ng pilis ko ni Sigay Dumi wa sa stuta mga piswa bata manis ta. Usuni ga nik minesa no skis ga sa mutya git matsuin no. Yoni ga gito ka tawag tagawito yan. Isinis tagamo tiswita mo wa itno minata sawidi tamano mamamo ko nga simida wa itno ga gito. Kantuta wa papiata iswingi gigo sigin tutin. Yung minyo west tayo tok na miye wa isun milas ngi wa titina wa ipagit ni ga tiru usigisin to tamuan gisiman to tasawili tawo mo tawo mata mingisan. So I humbly ask the Creator to bless our presentation here tonight, and humbly ask you at home, if you're listening, take in what's good and take what you can, take it in and share it with your family and share it with friends. But you know, we're asking the Creator to bless this presentation and to bless everybody that's joining in tonight in the Creator's mighty name. Hey. Thank you. Okay, so with that, once again, I officially introduced myself. Nista Manima, all my life, growing up on the reservation in Pelican Narrows, and then moving on I graduated from our own reservation school, Wapawi High School, in 1991. In 1991, I graduated from high school and moved on to the NORTEP program, which was recently no longer. It has dissolved as a program, but now there's another program in La Ronge that's taken over. The Northern Teachers Program is still through La Ronge, but it's mainly through the Lac La Ronge Indian Band now. So that's where I ended up getting my education degree to teach, and that's how I started my career. In 1996, I graduated from the NORTEP program and started my education career teaching in Pelican Arrows. But you know what, over the years, these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves in general. What are my treaty rights? What do we know about our identity? What do we know about our own history? What do I know about the treaties, and do I need more training? What does the treaty right to education mean? What curriculum do I use to teach identity? And those are for some of the teachers, because across the north, there are so many of us that teach in our schools, and we need to teach some treaty education to our children right into the classroom. And what am I currently doing as a teacher, as a parent, to affirm our treaty right to education? We have a right out there. It's a right for us to go to school. We are the ones we ask for that right. But first of all, what do we know about our identity? First and foremost, Michitonis, growing up on the reserve, a lot of times I used to wonder, who am I? Who am I really as a Cree person? Really, do I know who I am? And later on in life especially, you start to really ask yourselves who you are. When you start to become an adult, you really start to question who you are. Do you know really who you are? First time I ran into an identity crisis myself was when some people were introducing themselves. They were indigenous, and they knew so much about their own culture. They knew about the practices of their people. They knew about what ceremonies they attended. I grew up in a northern community where I was raised a Catholic, and all I knew was the Catholic faith. But I'm also a Cree Indian that speaks the Cree language without ceremony, without the knowledge of his people. That's how I grew up. I used to wonder all the time, who am I? Later on in grade 6, grade 7, attending school, I start to see these units that are introduced in social studies, introducing Riel, introducing Gabriel Dumont, introducing Big Bear, introducing Crowfoot, Poundmaker, all these great names of these great leaders that I didn't even have any knowledge of whatsoever. So that was my first introduction in grade 7, personally experiencing for the first time who our real indigenous people were. I did have no sense of history of who our people were. And that was embarrassing at grade 6, grade 7, to start to first question who you are. So anyway, that's the first time, and in the library they had this little section in the corner of our little library at the school, which was all indigenous books, and that was the first time I started reading a little bit about the great leaders of Poundmaker, Big Bear, and what they did in Canadian history. But even going further, while I'm going to university, now I'm starting to wonder, what about us as a Cree people in Pelican Arrows, Peter Valentine Cree Nation? Who are we as a people? Do we know who we are? And that's where the first time the history books would call us Woodland Cree. But the Cree name we call ourselves, Asinskalik, means Rocky Cree. We're Rocky Cree because in Pelican Arrows, you're amongst the rock and lakes and trees. So we're associated, the name is associated with the area that you live in. There's people in Puggetwagan, Manitoba that still refer themselves as a Sinscoutnook, Sandy Bay, South End, DeChambeau, Pelican. That's that main area where we call ourselves the Rocky Creek and the Paw. Some areas in the Paw. So that's the traditional area of the Rocky Creek is where I come from. And it took me, I am 56 years old. That didn't take very long for me to start digging up the real roots of who I am. I could say I was indigenous and I understand the real story of the treaties and everything, but a little deeper to who we are. Example, even Montreal Lake. Same thing. Do you know who your leaders are? Who the leaders were even before treaty, right? Do we have any oral stories of who the great medicine people were in Montreal Lake before? We have to keep those stories sacred. That is the last of our history. Mm-hmm. So it's very important to make connection with elders as much as you can. Every time an elder passes away in your community, it's like a chapter in your local history book. It's gone. We will never hear it again. Unless that elder has passed on that oral history to somebody else in the community. So over the years, when I travel, I make it a habit to try to reach out to some elders in every community. When you start reaching out to some elders in the community, you start to get a sense of the history of that community and how it operates and how they move, right? So it's very important to make connection and to understand, especially in First Nations, Indigenous country in Canada, we were here before treaty. A lot of us have that thought process that we became Indian at treaty. No, it's beyond that. In my own area, we find pottery remains in DeChambeau Lake. Pots were made out of clay, estimated 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that's how far I dig into trying to find out my claim into where I come from. We have to make claim to make history, to let these children know that your people used to make clay pots. How come you guys are not making clay pots today? Your people were able to do it 10,000 years ago in the same area. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there is something here that makes clay pots. We have to go find that area where they used to go collect clay. It's a practice of our people, which we've forgotten, right? But finding the artifacts tells you how long we've been here. 10,000 years, or probably more. So for us, the first remains are pottery, and then the fur traders starting to come into our area, starting to record little bits and pieces of who's in the area and stuff. During the late 1700s, the Cree, a Sinscoutnook Rocky Cree from the northeast side of present-day Saskatchewan and Manitoba, had permanent villages in the area. During this time, the main trading posts for the Cree of this area were at York Factory and Cumberland House. The main waterway to get to these posts from Saskatchewan side was by traveling through Pelican Lake, through the Narrows onto Montreal Lake, which would connect the Sturgeon Weir River onto Cumberland House. The Cree at the time at the Narrows very seldom allowed other tribes to pass through to seek trade. The Cree acted as middlemen to trade with other tribes, as opposed to tribes seeking trades with the trading posts. So a lot of times when we hear about the historical fights between Dene people, Dakotas, and Cree over the fur trade, the area where I live, there was wars. Wapawi Wustigan in Cree is 3 words. Wapau means narrows. Wustigan means a place to fear. The narrows of fear. Because that's where our Cree people would stop the other tribes from going beyond the trading posts. And sometimes there was people killed. Sometimes there was tribes that would take children and women from each other. These are the oral stories that we carry. And I'm glad that we don't carry that pain anymore. The treaties in some way too brought our people together. And the story between the Sioux and the Dene, when we talk with Dene people, they know that we had these warfares over the fur trading post. In Western Canada, a Dene lady, the Cree had captured a Dene lady and her cousin and kept her in the Cree camp for 2 years. And these two Dene ladies escaped. They thought they were running back to Dene country. They were running south. One of them died along the way and the other one fell on the trail. And a company master from Hudson's Bay named James Knight found this Dene lady on the trail almost dead, frozen. Took her back to York Factory. This is in 1700s. And brought her back to life. And when they realized she was coming back to life, they realized she could speak Cree and Dene. So to the company master, this lady was very sacred because he could use her to put peace between the Cree and the Dene. Thundalser was her name. And the Hudson's Bay Company in Winnipeg has a great picture of this Dene lady. 300 years ago, wanted to wear a red dress to go meet the Dene people. Amazing story. Because 300 years later, we honor missing women with a red dress. This Dene lady 300 years ago wanted to wear a red dress to go meet her people in the middle of winter. With 150 Cree men, with blankets, plates, knives, all kinds of gifts to give to the Dene to create this peace. After that happened, that peace was created. The following year, Cumberland House was built. So before that, the only trading that happened was at Churchill or York Factory. And until that peace happened, Cumberland House was made in 1774. So that's where these Indian warfares with the fur trade was happening. They were fighting over knives, axes, beads, anything the white man brought forward. Everybody wanted a piece of it. They were fighting over it. Alcohol was one of them. So these were all the things that were going on 300 years ago, right in my area. When I was a little child growing up we call it the Narrows. They just call it the Narrows in Pelican. If you go around to the beach area over there and dig around in the sand, chances are you're going to find an arrowhead. There's arrowheads. This time of year, especially the water was very low, I bet you the Narrows would have been caked with a whole bunch of arrowheads or possibly a tomahawk somewhere in the sand there, right? So we have to dig up some of our own history sometimes. But that's the story of the area where I come from. I carry that story, and it's 300 years old. I already know that there was Cree people in Pelican Narrows 300 years ago because a fur trader master started recording some of the stuff that was going on. So that's how far back we try and track back where they first started recording in black and white. But our oral tradition tells us we've been here forever, right? We don't have no sense of 300 years ago. We just say a long time ago when we talk. Right, yeah. And here's an aerial view photo of my community. And Peter Ballantine Cree Nation is unique because it's a multi-community band. Peter Ballantine is made up of 8 communities. And Pelican Arrows is the largest one. And here's a picture of the trading post of Pelican Arrows in 1939. This was our store. And this is a little arrow pointing to the store. This was a store that burned down as well. And they recently rebuilt a new store in the same spot. And right beside the northern store, across the road right here, this is where I grew up. I grew up right across the northern store, and It used to be called the Hudson's Bay Company until 1988, I believe, or 87 is when Northern Store bought out Hudson's Bay. So that the name changed from Hudson's Bay to Northern Store. So this is my community, and today there's roughly about 4,000 of our people that live in my community. And so that's where I grew up. And why it's significant is because right up to about in the late 1970s, the only treaty day we would ever have is in Pelican Narrows. So the people from Sandy Bay, DeChambeau, South End would all make an effort to come to Pelican for treaty day. It's amazing, back then it's $5, but the treaty was pretty important to people. They wanted their name registered as picking up their money. And they would come and they would celebrate in Pelican. Sometimes the treaty day back then was 4 days long, with people celebrating, square dancing, dancing all night, and having fun. So, the other thing we have to focus on prior to treaty is traditionally, indigenous children were educated by parents and elders who passed down traditions, skills, knowledge, and wisdom accumulated over many generations. And that's the same way a lot of times some of our children, if they're still living out in the land, there's no curriculum guide, there's no lesson plans. Everything is done orally and by observation. Our people do things by seeing, right? And watching. So that's the same way everything has always been done in the indigenous country. It's always been done traditionally. It's been weaned by the parents. And the reason why we bring this up is because you see these bonds right here. There's people enjoying themselves. They're smiling. They're having a great time being a family. And at some point in our history, that got taken away from us. That comes a little bit later. So with that, the way we were traditionally teaching our children the ways of the land, we also have to introduce our own worldview to our children. So our worldview that we introduce to our children is that the Creator is the ultimate spirit entity, the ruler and the giver of all life. The Creator. So we teach our children that there is always somebody watching you. That's how I teach my grandchildren, or I talk to my children about God. That there is always somebody above you watching you at all times. So when you're doing wrong, when you're doing right, there's always somebody watching you. So once you start to have that sense there's always somebody watching you, your conscience starts to tell you what's right or wrong, and you want to continue stay on the right side when you know the Creator is always watching you. When you get that sense that you know there's a Creator out there. Some of our people walking around on the reservation today, unfortunately, do not have no connection with the Creator. And when you don't have no connection with the Creator, unfortunately, the end result will be you have very little respect for mankind. And we see a lot of that on the reservation. We see lots of disrespect, lots of dysfunction, because we do not teach the historical worldview. And it doesn't have to be the indigenous worldview if you don't want to be the indigenous person. Some of us choose to be Christian, but instead of Creator, we say God, right? So we introduced the concept. I asked an elder one time, how do I even start to bring God into my family? When you eat, pray for your food. And sure enough, when I start praying for my food, the children will get curious enough. Who are you talking to? I'm talking to God. Saying thank you for this wonderful meal. God made everything. God made the vegetables for us to eat. When you start talking like that, they start, and there'll be times when your kid will tell you, hey, you forgot to pray to God, right? They'll start reminding you, and that's how God touches you. Touches your family. What? How many of us actually ask that question to an elder? How do I bring God into my home? Because God has to have a presence, because God leads all love and respect for mankind. And we have to try and reinforce that with our children. Whether they listen or not, we try, right? And you do the best you can. And with our First Nations historical worldview, we have a strong belief in the sun, Mother Earth, the moon, and the stars. You know, in the Cree culture, there's a Cree word that's repeated twice. Achak is a star. Your spirit, Achak. Achak. So what does that mean? What does that tell you? That means before Christianity, indigenous people would look up to the skies and say good night to the Atsabak. Because we believed every twinkling star up there was our ancestors. And we believed one day that our own Atsak would be twinkling up there. And remember, some stars twinkle brighter than others, depending on what you do down here. Right? So, keep that Atsak bright. Keep Atsak sacred. Now that I understand that knowledge myself, I'm very careful on what I say around people. Because my Atsak could destroy somebody's Atsak. Right? That's no good. My Atsak might get dark. It's too dark. I want it to twinkle. I want it to be bright. I want it to be full of life. And when you're full of life, that means you got lots of love for everybody. So, that's why we have a heavy belief in the stars. And plus the stars, what do they also do? They lead us the way. They tell us the days, the years, right? So very heavy. So, and Mother Earth provides plant life, small insect life. You know, example, a spider in Cree, Kugumanagi Trus. In Cross Lake, Manitoba, they call them Kugumanagi Teats. Which I kind of laugh because it's a little different, but they say things different in different areas. But anyway, I explained the story of Kugumanagi Trus. You hear the word Kugum. Kugum. Menagi Trus. Grandmother insect. Why did we call it a grandmother? Because back in the day, my people used to live in a birch bark dwelling. Birch bark. And when Kugumanagi Trus came in there, he would make a little web in the corner, and all the flies would be caught there, and the children wouldn't get sick. So, as a matter of fact, that insect was very sacred. Today, little kids, spider! Right? We all yell spider and try and kill it. We're actually teaching a kid how to kill at a young age when we say kill it. And we don't explain why we kill it. Right? And it's a secret. Our culture tells us that was Kugum. You're killing Kugum. Right? So think about that when we dig into our culture, the sacredness behind even an insect. Right? And not only that, the two-legged animals. We were some of our oral tradition tells us before time, we were able to talk to the animals. That's some of our oral tradition, right? And a lot of the things that we do are associated with animals. In the Cree culture, we're very heavy on animism. They call it animism. Like for me, when I was younger, if I tended to be eating lots and being greedy, they'd call me Musqua. Musqua the bear never stops eating. So they'd make reference to an animal, and if you were sneaky, the magisis, fox, right? So they make reference to animals and behaviors of animals. Or they teach children, don't be like a muskrat, don't be like what's us. And they tell you a story why you don't be like what's us. But a story behind that behavior to try and correct your behavior. A lot of us in Cree culture, let's say, don't step on that spider, it'll rain. You ever hear that one? Or, don't put your shoes on backwards. You'll Yes, you'll walk into a bear. So these teachings, they're still there, right? We're sharing right now, and right away you're nodding, saying, yes, I've heard this before. Mm-hmm. So those are still our teachings, they're still there. and especially tobacco and smudging. We have a very heavy belief in that because we believe every time we smudge, the smoke goes up to the Creator. Our prayers are carried up with the smoke. That's why it's so sacred. And that's why we practice that. We can even do that at home in front of our children when we're saying we're trying to bring the Creator into our home. Buy a smudge bowl. Sage. Sage grows all over in Canada. And start smudging in front of your kids. You know what those kids start doing? They start to want to smudge with you. And they start to understand that there's a higher power. So then that's our jobs as parents, to teach that to our children. So, when you hear the Cree word nihido, you kind of hear the word nio, four. We do things in a lot of four things, a lot of four directions, everything in fours. So in mankind we believe in the emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental state of a human being to be in balance with life. And when they say our people could travel in time back before anything, because the medicines were so powerful, we already knew there was red people in this world, there was black people, there was white people, there's yellow people. Our medicine wheel told us the colors of mankind. So our medicine people already knew that these colors were out there. They knew the world. They could travel the world. They could see things that we could not see. They're gifted. And we just simply have to believe our medicine men when they tell us these things, because a lot of times those things come to pass, what they tell us. So when they were saying that these new people that are coming to us back in the day, and they're going to slowly take over everything, that's exactly where we're at today. We've gone through that experience through our timeline, right from 1492, with the doctrine of discovery with Christopher Columbus. The Pope himself said, if you can go find land out there with nobody there, well, you could claim it. Yeah. So anyhow, this is one of the biggest beliefs as well with our people. If we keep these four things in sync and in balance with ourselves, we create balance and harmony with Mother Earth. So emotionally, we should be able to laugh, emotionally open to cry when we need to cry, right? And especially be able to let it out when you need to let it out, when things are very heavy in your body. I've had that opportunity in my own life where life gets heavy and I feel it. And when I feel that heaviness, I have to go find certain people that I truly trust and that trust me, that I can open myself to them and let them know what I'm going through, so that they can help me walk through what I'm going through. And that's how I'm able to deal with my emotion. And sometimes too, when you want to go find a crowd of friends that you know you're going to laugh, you know, like you want to go to a bingo game and you're going to find the right ladies, all you're going to do is laugh all evening, you're going to have sore cheekbones in the morning. That's what I'm talking about. Not just the sad part, not just the heavy part, but even emotionally when you feel like you need to have a good laugh, right? So you know who they are. You know who your little circle is that makes you laugh. So it's good to touch with your emotions. Now when we get to the mental state, Also, it's also good to ask yourself, am I mentally okay sometimes, right? I question myself all the time, am I making the right decisions? Especially when you're married. Now you have a partner and you have to confide with your partner all the time. Are we making the right decisions? Are we making the right choices, right? So, mentally and also working at the workplace. Are you sharp? Are you on top of your things? There's times when if your emotions are very heavy, it might affect your mental capacity and you're not able to perform your work. So that's why balance, like I said, balance is very, very important when we're dealing with all these four things. And like on a good morning spirituality, wake up with an opening prayer. Wake up thanking the Creator that you have another day of life. Don't ask for anything. That's not a prayer when you're asking for anything. I used to pray like that. My own spirituality was I used to pray to God, oh please God, give me a Fender guitar, being a young teenager. I didn't even have a clue. That's not even praying, that's begging. But, later on, when God doesn't answer your prayers, you could turn around and go against God and start not believing in God because your prayers are not getting answered. But it's the way I was praying. Sincere praying just means right from your heart. Like Native people, there's two ways we're praying today. Ayam Yawin, back home in Cree, we say Ayam Yawin. That means a piece of paper and I'm reading. Ayamichigi. Ayamichigi means reading in Cree. So when you say go to church and you say Mtoayamia, means go and read. You're reading God's word. So, and the other way, our Cree people, when we're using the smudge, now the Cree word changes to kagisimo. Kagisimo now means you're using your heart to talk directly to the Creator. Kagisimoin. So when you're speaking with the Creator and you're just letting it flow from your heart, there's times when I have a very powerful prayer, and there's times when I can't even say the prayer because my heart is so hurt. When I still look at the smoke, and I remind myself the Creator is listening. So I might even just have a tear, but that's still my prayer to the Creator because I'm giving Him all my heart, right, in my prayer. So that's where spirituality, get connected to the Creator. Whichever way, whichever lifestyle you're living, save a little room for the Creator every day. Every day. Because every day we're getting up and we appreciate life, right? Physically in my own life, I physically changed. I used to be a very big guy. I used to be a former chief. I used to sit in the restaurants 3 times a day, all year long, eating greasy food. Today, I am very, very careful on how I eat. I'm diabetic, and I used to eat 5 pills. I'm down to 3, and I exercise with my bike at home, push myself to do it 3 times a week. But especially when you're 56 and you have grandchildren now, you actually want to live long. You want to live long for them. So I've changed a lot of habits. I've changed a lot of my ways to deal with my physical life. And the one biggest thing especially is alcohol. I'm actually open to say that I say no to alcohol. I'm very proud of myself today. I can tell anybody that comes up to me. And I'm also an entertainer on weekends, so I get to watch a lot of people drink in front of me. But it's my will, it's my choice, it's my decision. When I say no, that's me. That's entirely up to me. And nobody can break that. It doesn't matter what anybody says. So that's where I'm at right now. You don't know what the future holds. Sometimes things can happen in this wheel. You could be at a very all-time low. You don't know. But today, I'm very proud that I pray daily. I thank the Creator daily, and I keep an eye on my own wheel. Sometimes I need to get emotional. Sometimes I need to check my mental noggin. and especially to keep God in here and keep moving a little bit, right? So that's the medicine wheel, and that's something we believed in before. We believed in this prior to contact. This is something we exercise. When you needed to deal with your mental capacity, they'd send you to an elder. They come in and say, Amy, there's something bothering your mind. Go talk to an elder. And they send you to the right elder too. The one that's sincere, that will try and fix your mind. Right? So we had our ways of dealing with the medicine wheel at all times. Now today, we look at these areas: identity, Cree language, culture, treaties. They're all interrelated with history. It's all part of us. It's all part of our identity. And this is where we need to be in the middle, right here. So our children have a good understanding of identity, know that they're Cree, know the ways of their people, and to know where they fit in Canada today with these treaties, right? But we start at identity. Who are you? Do you really know who you are? And a lot of sad kids nowadays, when I go to the schools, they don't know how to react back or to tell you who they are. And that's a big problem everywhere. Identity crisis could lead to mental illness. Identity crisis could lead to emotional, right? Not knowing who you are. So it's very critical that we identify who we are, and also it doesn't matter what has happened in Canadian history, we still have to be proud and resilient of who we are. We're still here as a people. So that's very important. All four strands work in unison. It strengthens one's identity. It creates a sense of belonging. It promotes pride, sense of community, and it creates the worldview of our people. These are all these components. That's what they start to do for our people. When we start accepting who we are as a people, right? And throughout history as well, in Canada, when you open up all these different curriculum resources that we use in social studies, language arts, you might run across some of these names, because we are one of the most labeled people in the world. Indigenous people in Canada. When I look back at the history books, when I read social studies, there's the word Native, Indigenous, Aboriginal, First Nations, Treaty Indian, band member. Look at all the different names we have. No wonder some kids sit there and say, I don't know who I am. Right? Because look at the way every time the Canadian government tried to correct itself with Indian people across Canada, they come up with a magical new name. They think a new name's going to fix Indian people. No. Look at what has happened. You've labeled us so many times we don't even know who we are now.
You forgot to put something else up there.
That's what I mean. There is so many different names now. At one point we were Bill C-31 Indians too. So these different labels, that's why it's so important we have to have our own people teach who we are. Because look at these labels. They can really disrupt the way our children are looking at who they are growing up. So we have to be careful, even as educators, as leaders in the community, what proper term do we use? Today we use the word Indigenous, right? 20 years from now, is that going to change again? Maybe we might be alien. We don't know. The way they've been changing names, you don't know what kind of name they might come up with again. And you know what? We're following suit. Look at the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. Now it's changed to the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. 20 years from now, we might be KFC. I don't know. But we change these things and we shouldn't. Like, the FSIN has made reference to the word Indian in reference to the treaty. because the treaties doesn't have the word indigenous. It has the word Indian. So some of the elders in Saskatchewan were also not very happy with that name change, right? And did we get consulted throughout Saskatchewan? I'm not sure. I'm a former chief, so I kind of keep tabs a little bit on the politics of Saskatchewan. Anyway, so then came the treaty. So in our treaty exercise, we try and teach our children the medallion, first of all. What does it mean? The medallion itself tells us the sun shines, the grass is green, the river is flowing, and there's peace being made. So even the medallion itself is a teaching to the children, and they get excited just seeing the medallion up on the board, and they start asking questions, right? So these were the kind of medallions they were given. They didn't have no specific number back here. So, and they also had 1870, right? Because they were going west. They didn't know what number they were going to stamp on here. So they made, I think, 24 or 25 of these across Canada. So when they were coming in, that's when they met up with us. 13 years later, Montreal Lake, Lac Orange, and Peter Valentine signed treaty at Mullinosa, Saskatchewan. And for us, we were under Lac Orange Indian ban up till in 1894. Peter Valentine, later to be the first chief of the Cree Nation, was admitted to treaty along with 41 other members of his extended family at Potato Lake near Orange. So Peter Valentine had trapping grounds in the 11,000 square mile area ceded to the Crown. You know that Wapawika Hills? That was his former trap line, right by the 50-mile stretch area. So in time, other future members of the Cree Nation centered at Pelican Arrows entered Treaty 6, paddling to Laurence to state their case with the Indian agent of the day. In 1898, Indian agent Hilton Keith traveled to Pelican Arrows and admitted over 100 more individuals living there into the Lac Orange Indian Band. As Pelican Arrows continued pressing their claim to be recognized as a separate band, the Department of Indian Affairs finally relented and recognized the Cree Nation as a separate entity apart from the Lac Orange Indian Band in August 1900. Peter Valentine was appointed the first chief, serving the capacity until 1917. So this year we're celebrating 125 years of our treaty at Orange, Montreal Lake, and Peter Valentine. I mean, for us anyway, the official date is 1900. So Orange and Montreal Lake, I'm not sure, because we argued we argued and paddled up and down Orange until finally the Indian agent allowed Peter Valentine to have his own band. So we were under Lac Orange Indian Band. And even further there, some of the band members from Peter Valentine went further to Puggidawagan and some to Brochet, Manitoba. So Pelican Arrows, we have family members from Puggidawagan to Nelson House to Brochet, all along the Churchill River. There's families. Niidoak is the Plains Cree word of the Cree people. Other words the Cree use to describe themselves include Nihido, Nihino, and Ininu. The Cree are most populous and widely distributed indigenous people in Canada. Cree First Nations occupy territory subarctic regions from Alberta to Quebec, as well as portions of the plains and regions of Alberta and Saskatchewan. According to 2016 census data, 356,655 people identified themselves as Cree ancestry, and 96,575 people speaking the Cree language. Now, recently the new stats that came out with our languages is 2021. So this number of 96,000 people speaking Cree across Canada has now gone down to 40,000. So those are the last 40,000 speaking Cree people in Canada, which I'm one of them. After that, the Cree language is dead. Unless we make a really strong effort to revive our indigenous languages in Canada are gonna die. And we're allowing it to happen. Some of our indigenous schools that we operate at the school level need to bring in the indigenous language once a day. Minimum 1 hour a day. You know how we lost our language? We weren't allowed to speak our language at residential schools. Now, we have to introduce, my own mother went to residential school where she was introduced French. Let alone having a hard time understanding English, she's introduced to French. 1 hour a day. My mother is 76 years old and she can still remember half of those French words because she heard it every day. When you hear a language every day, it's going to stay with you. But in most of our schools, we're teaching grade two class twice a week for a half an hour. Now, who's going to retain language for half an hour twice a week? You got to hear it every day. And most importantly, this number can be increased if we start it at home. Nowadays, we have so much technology, there's Cree apps everywhere. You can learn the Cree language through an application program. So you can't say, oh, we're just going to allow it to die. Oh, we're doing nothing. The effort has to be from us, and it has to start from home. I live in Prince Albert. My children understand it. 2 of my oldest ones speak it because I speak it at home. My dad saved our language. I went to the day school in the reserve, but as soon as I got home from school, my dad would say one thing: neither we speak Cree here. So we weren't allowed to speak English in our home. And I thank my dad for doing that, for saving our language. That's good parenting when you do that, when you recognize who you are and you want to save your language. So that's what my father did. When we'd come home from day school, from home, he'd say, Nidwi. No English here. Later on, though, when he became a grandfather, you start seeing bits and bits of how much he loves his grandchildren. He starts to let go of his Cree language. I have to go remind my dad a few times. Dad, you're forgetting to say Nidwi to the grandchildren. So, so even there, we can't love our grandchildren so much that we want to speak English first before Cree. Yeah. We have to speak Cree to them. We're Cree people. Nusim. And say Nusim. And teach them the proper way to say it. Nugum. Not kukum. Nugum. Nugum means that's my grandmother. When you say mushum, that's not the right way. Nimushum. Ne. Ne means that's mine. You're possessing your grandfather. That's what I teach my grandchildren. I don't teach them kukum mushum. I teach them nimushum. Nugum. Say it the proper way. Right? So that's how I start at the home level. So when the treaties came around, these are all the numbered treaties in Canada. And where I come from, we were the 355th band that signed treaty out of 600 bands. So the last one that was signed is somewhere over here in 1948. That's not very long ago. Treaty negotiations, right? So ours, you guys I think are what, 354 or 353? 354. So 353 is Lac La Ronge, 354 is Montreal Lake, 355 is Peter Valentine. So that's when we saw the treaty number. The first 3 numbers of your treaty number is 355 for me.
Yeah.
Yours is 354, right? So that's where that label comes in. We're all labeled by number through that treaty. So, and another thing, like I said, when we teach, here's a little quick picture of me showing the kids the treaty medallion. And they start asking all kinds of questions about it, just seeing the picture alone. So that's the beauty of teaching the treaties to the children. And the other things we try and reinforce at the school level is we also introduce Cree nights, where we provide a night where people are allowed to come to the gymnasium and participate in Cree activities like Cree Bingo. Cree Bingo is very popular. And another one is Name the Object. There's lots of objects in this world that don't have no Cree name for it, but we invent those Cree words and it is hilarious. It's very fun to invent Cree words. So we have these kind of sessions, and we also have what they call Toastmasters. Toastmasters activity, where we give you a sheet of paper and you have to decipher it all in Cree, and you can't use a word of English. And as soon as we hear a word of English, you have to go sit down and let somebody else finish it. That type of deal. But stuff like that, just to reinforce language, right? And the biggest thing is not to give up. We do this once a month. In one of the communities, we have a normal following of about 40 to 50 parents that show up for a Cree night every month when they have Cree night. So that's pretty good. They start with a little meal, and we go into activities, and we have door prizes, and they also have prizes for bingo. So lots of parents come up. And it's also open for the children. And the bingo cards, it could be a bingo card with household items like a chair, a broom, a cup, but they're all yelled out in Cree, right? So lots of kids will walk up and I know how to say ulala, right? I know how to say cup in Cree now, but they hear it during the bingo game. So you're transferring language while you're doing these activities. And of course, we also do, we'll introduce some Cree songs, either children's Cree songs, or sometimes we'll take hymn books from the Anglican and the Catholic hymn books, and we'll do the Cree songs. We'll sing them. And I get a kick out of this one because I always use this presentation at a presentation, and I ask a big group of all these educators one time. There's about 400 of them, and I said, "What is this word?" They're all wondering what it is. I know it's syllabics. What does it say? They don't know what it is. So then I go, that's that same word. Now say, Ogiskinamayu. What is that? In Cree, Ogiskinamayu means teacher. Teacher. Ogiskinamayu. And why I introduced that is because in 1972, across Canada, we had something called Indian Control of Indian Education. Our people were tired of having the government looking after our education affairs. The chiefs of the nation, National Indian Brotherhood, with Noel Star Blanket, leading the way. He was the one that took charge, wanting control of the education services on reserve, band control. So today we use the term band operated, but back then they wanted what they called band control, where chief and councils would control the destiny of their education on reserve based on treaty. So why I come up with this is because this is what they wanted in 1972. There was two big things they wanted to happen in Canada when our chiefs got mad and said, we want to look after our education. We want teaching in the native language, number one. Number two, teaching the native language. So, when I go like this, how many years after and nobody can read this, we haven't done our work. A lot of us should be recognizing this. And we don't recognize it because we don't put language first, right? When we assume control, we didn't implement a language strategy to go along with that control. And in the process, we lose our language, right? So we should have recognized that in a split second after how many decades of control, and we didn't. We recognize this, it's in Roman orthography. But this is what they wanted, language and culture. Indian children must have the opportunity to learn their language, history and culture in the classroom. Curricula will have to be revised in federal, provincial, territorial schools to recognize the contributions which the Indian people have made to Canadian history and life. And right here, parental responsibility and local control. That's what the chiefs wanted in 1972. That's why we have band schools today. That's why we have our own band staff. That's why we have our own teachers. When I was in the 1970s growing up in Pelican Arrows, there's maybe two TAs. And actually one of them just retired a couple of years ago. But 2 TAs. Today you go into those schools, almost 100% Pelican Arrows, Peter Valentine, Cree Nation members, all with degrees teaching in a school. And we're still losing language. Because we need to implement a stronger language strategy. Not just in Peter Valentine, it's everywhere. Like I'm saying, one bad thing about residential school is they took our language away. But one thing they did over there is they forced those Indian children to learn French 1 hour a day. To the point where some of our elders still know French. Because that strategy of 1 hour a day works. If we do that in our schools, if our children can listen to Cree 1 hour a day, and let's do it from 9 o'clock in the morning till 10, when they're first coming in, when their minds are so fresh, ready to learn. And we feed them a little bit, right? That's how most of our schools operate nowadays, because some of our kids are coming to school hungry. They're coming in through the classroom and telling the teacher, "Teacher, I'm hungry. I can't learn when I'm hungry." But whose fault is that? Again, we go to parental responsibility. We wanted to be responsible over our children when we were tired of the Indian agent telling us how to live our life every day. So when we took over, well, we sure took over, because now look at what condition we're in. You know what we call that? Dysfunction. A lot of us are going through a lot of dysfunction at the reserve level because of the experiences we've gone through. And we haven't even begun to deal with some of those traumas. The traumas of residential school, the traumas of day school, the traumas of 60s school. And it goes on and on. Today now we're child and family services. Children that age out, what do we do with them? They're dying in the streets because there's nothing there that tells that young person, this is where you go now when you're done. They're just told, no, that's it, your services are done. And if you do not prepare that young person for the world, they're not going to succeed. And in most cases, don't take them to Edmonton or Vancouver. They're going to end up back in their reserve. Show them that they're going back there. Why try and create a big phony, going to big cities they'll never see again? Tell them the realities of where they're going to be going back when they age out. You might not even have a place to sleep when you go back to the reserve. Some of your own aunts and uncles might not want to take you back. That's how we have to talk to our people nowadays. And that's reality. That's where it's at. If you don't want to talk about it, it'll never change. But if we start talking about it, that's where change starts. Because it's an issue. It becomes an issue when you see too many young people. And we wanted that parental responsibility. I myself lost my parental responsibility several times being a drunk. Not making the right choices with my own family. Then I start to lose my children in the process. You might have rebellious children that come back and want to fight you. They're mad at the way they grew up. And you know the saddest thing about that is we always say, I'm never going to do that when I have my own kids. When I have my own family, I won't do that. It's almost like we ask for that. For me anyway, I said all these things. I'll never drink. I won't do this too. All those things I said I wouldn't do, I went and did. But thank God I have enough sense I was able to crawl out of it. And thank God I know my Creator to give me strength to do that. But some of our people don't have that. But we have to share this knowledge. That's how we're going to be able to lift our other people, is by sharing our knowledge. And not to be greedy about it. Doesn't matter how we say it. But take what's good. Take what's good and lift yourself from there. Because a lot of us, we really think down on ourselves. I know when I talk to people at our reserve, man, there's people that openly say, I can't do it. Well, you already gave up by saying that. You haven't even tried. So don't give up when you haven't even tried yet. Because the people that have that attitude, some of them become the most remarkable people once they come out of their shell. And it's just a matter of trying to get people over that. What is bothering you? What bothers you that you can't be the person that you really want to be? You know, a real nice person that we want to respect, and right? Sometimes in the reserve we go there and some people don't even want to look at you in the eye. They carry so much pain and dirt. They don't even want to look at. Some of them don't even want to say hi. Right? So we carry a lot of pain too. We're resilient people. There's a lot of good people that are able to lift. But there's also a lot of people in pain. And a lot of us, especially that spirituality part, if we don't get serious in teaching that in our homes and in our communities, you know, the damage, long term. When you don't teach a kid about the Creator, about consequence, the kid grows up without consequence. He doesn't know if he's doing right or wrong. He might be stabbing a little kid in grade 1 with a pencil and say, I didn't do it. You won't feel any guilt because somebody's not telling him that's wrong. So he'll grow up without, and especially when you become a teenager and you go around disrespecting like that, next thing you know, you're standing like this. Now there's nobody to help you, right? Because you've been disrespectful growing up, not listening on the reserve all your life. Even though elders have been telling you, along the side you had your parents telling you, your uncles, everybody along the side. You just didn't open your ears. Now you're in real serious trouble. Now you're calling out to the Creator, finally. Maybe the wrong place, but you're still calling out to the Creator. Make connection. God is always watching. I always say the Creator is always watching. So I'm very careful what I do nowadays because He's always watching. Even though I have it's very hard to drive by the casinos nowadays. Anyway, treaty rights. There are certain rights that were reserved by indigenous peoples when they signed treaties with settler societies in the wake of European colonization. There's a guy there that actually painted treaty number 7, I think, or 8, treaty 10, somewhere in Alberta. This is how it was done. We had our people on one side, but you know what? Most of the history books, they always show like these guys showed up and these guys showed up and they signed a treaty. Our people were here for days. Even the treaty says, and on the 4th day, right? So they were there for 4 days. They just didn't have oh, hi. No, they sat there, they sang, they prayed, they had ceremony, because the life of their people was going to drastically change based on this treaty. They were already told you're going to be confined to a reservation, a piece of land. So they already started having a sense of, confinement, surrender, the word surrender. I don't think it was ever properly explained, that treaty, the word surrender. Because we look at the land as Mother Earth. It's our mother. Kigawi no aski. So, any one of you, would you surrender your mother? No. Most people say we would never surrender our mother. So we know, orally and historically, we never surrendered the land. We agreed to live in unison, together, work together with this treaty. That was our belief. That was the true belief behind it, when we were agreeing on this treaty. So the word surrender was never really explained. So Treaty 4, 5, and 6, that's where the words of the cunning of the white man come in. Nowadays, in federal government, post-secondary funding is still administered like a social policy, like we were on welfare. It's not recognized as a treaty right. K to 12 is a treaty right, but we still have issues with post-secondary. But at one point, we were only allowed to be taught up to grade 8 in Canada. They only allowed Indigenous people only up to grade 8. And you couldn't graduate. That's as far as your education was allowed. And then in the 60s, they decided, no, we have to give them grade 12 in order to work in Canada. Because most cases in Canada in the 60s, when you were applying anywhere in the 60s in Canada, a minimum for a job qualification was grade 10. Mm-hmm. So in the 60s, if you were Indigenous, the most you ever had was grade 8. You could never apply for a job in Canada. So when they changed it, now we have graduates. That happened right when the Indian control started happening. Now we have graduates that annually, every year, Montreal Lake has their own graduates. And Peter Ballantyne does too, Lac La Roche. So we have our own graduates graduating right from the reserve now, based on that control. But the one thing was, back then, the Queen Morris said was offering the Plains, Cree, and Saulteaux the cunning of the white man. If they choose to adopt it, and shortly thereafter the commissioner offered, whenever you go to a reserve, the Queen will be ready to give you a school and a schoolmaster. So based on these things in our treaties, that's where we get our band schools. That's where we got band school operating. But it all stems from the treaty. So a lot of times when I'm teaching treaties to the high school students, I will tell them certain things like, look at this wonderful school. This beautiful, beautiful building is all based on your treaty number. They're all going, treaty number? Yes, education is a treaty right. It's because our grandfathers signed a treaty, we're given education. So our grandfathers wanted these schools in the reserve. And in return, sometimes we vandalize these schools. We go there and break windows. And it's our own treaty right. Another treaty right we break lots on the reserve is walking around drunk. Our grandfathers back in treaty said we don't want liquor on the reserve. Today we create these bylaws, but there was a law there already. There was a treaty law for you not to walk around drunk on the reserve. So when you're walking around drunk on the reserve, you're actually breaking your own law, your own treaty law. That's why back in the day, when you talk to elders, they would say treaty day, you would see elders going off the reserve in the bushes, drinking. Or if they were going to drink, they'd go off the reserve. You know, so obviously they must have had some respect for the reserve. Today, it's not there. We have bylaws that are trying to enforce it, but it's still, when you go into almost every reserve, you'll always see one or two people walking around drinking. Or looking for a drink, right? But it's, again, you're breaking your own law. And we say the treaties are sacred because they come from our sacred elders and sacred leaders. We ourselves have to uphold that treaty. So we have to respect it on the reserve. And recently, I just included this new slide because recently we got, sometimes the treaty, when they said 150 years ago, there's a lot of things written on the treaty and they didn't come through. A lot of those promises were broken. And over time, when our people become smart enough and there's legal people in Canada that can go back and double check the treaties and say, hey, we never got these farming implements. Montreal Lake never got their cows and plows because there's no farmland in Montreal Lake. So then over time, that became cows and plows money. Peter Ballantyne recently got $631 million because the government didn't give us cows and plows. Because based on those implements, we were supposed to be able to look after ourselves, like our livelihood. Mm-hmm. And that was the big missing piece. They didn't provide that over time. Because if they had kept on those farming implements, that could have been big. You know, even when our people tried farming, back in the 1920s, the Canadian government outlawed Indian people from using machinery if you're going to farm. Mm-hmm. So all the rest of the non-First Nations people were using machines, and the Indian still had to use his hands. So how could he keep up? So in other words, that's where all the farming Indians slowly start to disappear in Canada. They did make a go of it at first, mm-hmm. but there are still some bands that practice farming, southern bands. There's still some practice happening, but some of the stories behind it was that we were great farmers. But even there, even if you could have the best crop, only the Indian agent actually knew what you got for it. And then the Indian agent would cut you a voucher of what you thought. It was never the right amount. Yeah. He was getting ripped off, so they eventually quit, right? Who would want to work in conditions where you didn't know how much you were going to get paid for a lot of work? So, at the end of the day, the chiefs and headmen who signed a number of treaties negotiated educational rights complementary to their own Aboriginal teachings. So, once we signed into treaty and we accepted the Indian Act, this is where, when they introduced the Indian Act, this is the actual act we use to actually now pull children from their parents. This is the act that was, and it's still in effect in Canada today. It's never been rescinded. But they would use this Indian Act now to take our children from the communities. And what did the Indian Act do to the First Nations? It was enacted in 1876 and has since been amended, allows the government to control most aspects of Aboriginal life, Indian status, land resources, wills, education, land administration, and so on. In its previous versions, the Indian Act clearly aimed to assimilate First Nations people. And that's from 2011. Is the Indian Act still in effect? The Indian Act has undergone numerous amendments since its first passed in 1876. Today, it still largely retains its original form. The Indian Act is administered by Indian and Northern Affairs. Now it's called Indigenous Services Canada, formerly the Department of Indian and Northern Sea. That they've even changed their names twice. So, where there are 130,000 Indians in the country, our education and training of these people take care of only about 16,000. Of this number enrolled, only 883 reached grade 7, 324 reached grade 8, and 71 reached grade 9. I noticed in 3 of the provinces there are no grade 9 students. This was in 1946. So this is how many students we had across Canada. And only 883 reached grade 7, and 324 reached grade 8. Now this is our education rate. And then when they really did the damage is when they came in and enacted the Indian Act by taking children, changing them overnight. This is the same boy. So this is how he looked before. And you'll always notice the old photos, never a kid smiling. You notice nowadays you go into a band school and you want to take a picture of the children in the classroom, they're like, yeah, right? Look at that. They look terrified actually. They look scared. And look at these. In 1850 and 1860, assimilation of Aboriginal people through education becomes official policy. In 1869, the Act for the Gradual Civilization of Indian. There was a gradual act. You have to gradually become a white man or whatever. I don't know how you did it back then, but they actually had an act for the gradual civilization of the Indian in 1869. And then 1876, the first Indian Act, where they totally, through education, yes, it is a right, but we're going to deliver it, we're going to administer it, and this is how they did it. And when you affirm something to show or express a strong belief or dedication to something such as an important idea, that's affirming something. That's what we also have to do with our treaties. You know, one of the things I remember as a child when I go to a volleyball tournament on a weekend and I tell my parents I'm going to a volleyball tournament, my dad would always turn around and say, don't forget you're a treaty Indian. You know, but that was my dad's way of saying, don't forget who you are. But that's how my dad would identify himself, a treaty Indian. So he would always say that when I'd be leaving town. Don't forget you're a treaty Indian, you know, but it's saying, don't forget who you are. Which is always, when I think back about it, with my dad reinforcing identity. So when you think about treaty rights as an individual, when we think about indigeneity, there's 4 things we always believe in. Honor, respect, uphold, and value. Kistiritsigatiu. Kistidita, Kitanavidita, Manachita, Tipamatui. We call them Tipamatuina, things that have to be paid. Some Cree people call them Asutamagiwina. No. When you asutamo somebody, you're making an offering. The treaties are not an offering. They're a guaranteed deal. So, Tipamatu means you must pay. So the proper terminology when we use treaty in Cree, Tipamatuina. Tipamatuina, which means things that must be paid. Right? So proper terminology. But this is what I always try and teach. Honor, respect, uphold, and value your treaty. So once you know that area, you're going to be in sync with your identity. Once you start to know your treaty too, because your treaties are also part of your identity today. beyond being a Cree person today, I'm also a treaty Indian. So I've been labeled a few times in Canada, but first and foremost, I'm a Rocky Cree person, but I'm also a registered status Indian in Canada, right? Based on the treaty. So the more you know your identity, the better off you are. And this is another thing in closing that I also try and teach the kids when we're teaching treaties. Tipamatoin, treaty payments, musnia, ammunition, uskunigan, reserves, paskisigan, gun, sunyaskaw. Sunyaskaw. I even recorded a song in Cree called Sunyaskaw. It comes on NBC. But that's my treaty song to reinforce in the Cree language. It's Treaty Day. One ska, pasigo, sunyaskaw, right? Back in the day, it was an exciting time because $5 could actually buy you something. And the other thing Indian Affairs used to do is you used to get your annual medical checkup. Nowadays, you go to the medical place to get an x-ray, you almost look like an astronaut. When I was a kid, there was nothing. I'm just standing bare there with a bare x-ray coming through me, trying to find out if I had TB. Well, radiation? Look at today, how much we try to protect ourselves from that radiation. And back in the 70s, they're just grabbing one kid after the other, taking... You remember those treaty days? I remember those treaty days. But that's what they were doing. And then, these are the other Cree words. Ugimagan, Wagasweetinot, band counselors, Kitkiayet, elders, Sunyawigemau, Indian agent, Simaganis, we all know that one. Kitsu Ugimau. We don't. I used to have Queen Elizabeth here. Now I have to change it to. It used to be Kitsu Ugimasquil, but now we have a king, so we changed it to Kitsu Ugimau. Right? His Highness the King, because that's the crown. The treaties are with the crown, the British crown, right? So our treaties are with Canada and the British crown. These are the other words. Piwapiskusagipasun, the medallion. Piwapiskusagipasun. We pastigan, flag, the treaty flag. Yeah. Upagamasquiwiwa, drummers. Maskusia, grass. Sipe, river. Pisim, right? So all these things associated with Swagan, the pipe. That's why our treaties are so sacred. Because once they brought out the pipe, they invited a third party to the treaty. The federal government, the chief, and the creator. The creator became part of the treaty process when we brought the pipe in. That's why our treaties are so sacred, because the creator witnessed the treaties with us. Mm-hmm. That's why they're called sacred treaties to us. So that's how we have to uphold our treaties. Muskegia, medicines. Mamoopwin, meetings and gatherings. So, Treaty 6 is the only treaty that includes the medicine chest clause. Our chiefs requested to have medicines. Back in the day when our mighty medicine men, they were getting defeated by the priests. The priest would even sometimes give a blanket to the medicine man so the medicine man could get a flu. And then the same priest would give him flu medicine and cure him. Now, his medicine was more powerful than our medicine man. So defeating him with his medicine made our status of our medicines and our medicine man like this. And that's when you start seeing that spirituality take over. And that's what happened. And to this day, this is not a treaty right. It's in the Treaty 6, it's a clause, but they don't administer it like a right. Medicine, health in Canada, Canada only spends about 1.5% of its entire health budget on Aboriginal people in Canada. 1.5% of its entire health budget goes to Aboriginal people. So if it was recognized as a treaty right, maybe our health would be different. Because when it's administered the way it is right now, through social policy, when I was a kid, when I had a toothache, I used to be given Tylenol. Tylenol 500s to take the pain away. Now the government starts cutting off our medicines. What do we get today? Acetaminophen. A really lower grade, right? So we don't get the right medicines to really look after us. Because it's not a right. It's administered as a social policy, right? So it's still not recognized as a treaty right. However, if it's written in stone in the treaty, I don't think it would take too much for the Supreme Court of Canada to recognize it. The other words that are referred to, machiwin, hunting, wanigiwin, trapping. Treaty 10 has the word trapping. So the Dene bands in Saskatchewan, Black Lake, Fond du Lac, Hatchet, they all have English River, Pachinak, La Loche, they have trapping. Treaty 6 has hunting and fishing. But they have hunting, fishing, and trapping. So now if they were given traps, they might have compensation coming to them. I don't know. Anyway, these are the other words. Pagitawawin, fishing. A skip, land. And these are Istigiwa Pachitigana. That's the farm implements that they were supposed to provide back in the day. These were our cows and plows. As example, if they gave us all these every year, chances are some of our band members would start cutting their own lumber, building their own houses, right? But we didn't have that. So that's why that compensation came. So I think in closing off here, ladies and gentlemen, today, the spirit of the intent of treaty to education, we see, even just from the pictures alone, from our experience in residential schools, to the takeover in 1972, when we start having our own beautiful facilities to manage and operate on the reserves. And today, to have our own vibrant graduates, our own teachers from our own communities teaching at the community level. So these are all the good things that we also see coming out of the education treaty right. But at the same time, our experiences today from this education treaty right, the way it was administered, we still have a lot of damage control to do. There's still damage from the 60s scoop. There's damage from residential schools. There's damage, you name it. You start talking to people, it doesn't take long for you to start hearing the pain of our people. And I'm not saying everybody's in pain. There are some people that have dealt with their healing and they're doing just fine. They're getting along. But there are some people in our communities that are going through a lot and they don't reach out. You know, this program that you guys have here in Montreal Lake is a prevention program. Prevention means to avoid those problems from happening before they happen. That's what prevention is all about. I myself today I train myself to do that. I try and see the future before something happens to me. You know, I plan ahead so well that I'm afraid this might happen, or, you know, when you go around your decision making. But it's just being careful and being aware, but also living a good life also opens your mind a lot. When you're dealing with addiction, you're narrow-minded. You're only thinking about your... I'll speak from experience. When I wanted to drink, I'd have no problem finding 200 ways of how to find wisdom to want to drink, right? So that's the good thing now, is I changed my mindset now. Change that mindset to good things that you want to do, productive things, right? So for myself, that's how I try to perceive my life. As a former chief, I had the opportunity to lead my people, and I continue to lead my people through the pre-language program, the treaty education, and every day when I get up, if there's anything that I say that comes out of my mouth that you carry with you, that means some wisdom and knowledge has been passed on, and that's eldership. Working on eldership. I want to be a good, strong elder role model for the children in the future, and I try to learn from everybody and anybody, and I travel lots, and when I travel, I meet lots of people, and I get my strength, all my goodies from people. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed my talk, and I probably still have about 15 slides, but it's about 2 hours into the making, ladies and gentlemen. Kisagit na, don't be ashamed to say that too. That's another thing. Don't be ashamed to show love for people. When I say I love you all, I truly mean that from my heart. Kisagit about, because I'm giving you everything I can possibly give you. First of all, wake up. One skak. Get off what you're doing. Pasigo. Another Cree word. Get up. One ska means wake up. Pasigo means get up. And atoskaso. Work on yourself. Work on yourself. Everything else will start to fall into play when you start working on yourself. For the good of the best results that you want to see coming out of your own life. I'm not the perfect individualist. I got flaws, but I work on them. I get reminded when I'm not doing it right. And sometimes you'll have to give yourself your own pat on the back. There's nobody there to give you that pat sometimes. But it's okay, there's always somebody watching. I drove here by myself tonight. I had a good talk with the Creator on the way here. Right now my radio thing and the screen is busted in the vehicle, so there's only me and the Creator to talk. So there's no YouTube, there's no reaching out. And it's good because you know what? When you start hearing yourself talk too, sometimes you're your best healer. You heal yourself by listening to yourself saying, yes, this is what I want to do. Right? So with that, Kisagit na all, take care. I love you all, and I hope I haven't said anything to hurt anybody in any way. Thank you very much.